For centuries, the royal history of Scotland has been shrouded in mystery, with the queens of the realm often relegated to mere footnotes in the grand narrative of kings and battles. Yet, within the heart of this intricate story lies an untold legacy, one woven with secrets, alliances, betrayals, and hidden bloodlines that still echo through the halls of time. These queens, born into tumultuous times, were more than mere figures in royal portraits. They were powerful women who shaped the very fabric of Scotland's destiny. Their marriages, political alliances, and even their personal choices rippled through the course of history in ways that still leave historians questioning what is known and what is hidden. What if some of these royal women, whose names have been lost to time or distorted by myth, were the true architects of the nation's future? What if hidden heirs, illegitimate children, and secret bloodlines still carry the keys to Scotland's royal past? This is not just a tale of regal elegance or royal duty. It's a deeper, more layered exploration of power, identity, and the complex relationships that shaped one of Europe's most intriguing monarchies. But the story doesn't end in the past. In the modern world, DNA testing, rediscovered documents, and digital archives are breathing new life into these ancient mysteries, revealing the lives of queens whose legacies were long buried under centuries of royal intrigue. From the courts of France to the shores of Scandinavia, the queens of Scotland were part of a much larger tapestry, their stories interwoven with powerful European dynasties, hidden marriages, and unacknowledged children. So, what secrets remain locked away in these forgotten corridors of history? What royal connections have yet to be uncovered, waiting for the light of discovery? This is the fascinating and mysterious world we are about to explore, a world where royal bloodlines, family ties, and historical enigmas collide in ways that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Welcome to our channel. We are so glad to have you with us today. In this video, we'll be diving deep into the enduring mystery of the Scottish queens, exploring the hidden bloodlines, untold stories, and the intricate legacies that have shaped Scotland's monarchy in ways you've never heard before. Whether you're a history enthusiast or someone just beginning to uncover the fascinating layers of Scotland's royal past, you're in for a captivating journey. So grab a seat, settle in, and let's embark on this historical adventure together. Scotland's royal history is steeped in mystery, bravery, sacrifice, and intrigue, and at the heart of this tapestry stand its queens, figures often overlooked in the dominant narratives of kings and wars. Yet, these women, whether reigning queens or queen consorts, were far more than passive companions. They were political strategists, cultural icons, fierce protectors of dynasties, and symbols of both unity and discord. Their stories are rich not only in political consequence, but also in the undercurrents of legend, prophecy, and personal courage. Scotland's queens carried with them more than just titles. They bore the weight of dynastic expectation, and in many cases, their very identities carried secrets long buried beneath stone walls and silent halls. Their legacy is not only woven into the nation's historical record, but also veiled behind whispered tales and suppressed truths, forming what could be called the untold lineage. To understand the lives of these queens is to trace the often obscured line that defines Scotland's destiny. They were born into, or married into, a complex network of alliances, rivalries, and betrayals that defined medieval and early modern Scotland. Their every move was watched, judged, and politicized. Yet, many of them maneuvered within these constraints with astonishing grace and intelligence. One must remember that queenship in Scotland was not merely ceremonial. While men rode into battle or debated in parliaments, queens often held sway over the cultural and spiritual direction of the court. They were patrons of the arts, negotiators of peace, and in some remarkable cases, sovereign rulers who commanded armies and issued edicts. Consider Margaret of Denmark, who became queen consort to James III in the 15th century. Her marriage was a diplomatic coup that helped settle hostilities between Scotland and Denmark, resulting in the annexation of the Orkney and Shetland Islands. But Margaret was more than a peacemaker. Her influence at court was significant, and she is said to have inspired a brief cultural flourishing during an otherwise politically volatile reign. Her story, however, like so many of Scotland's royal women, fades into the margins of the official chronicles, her actions minimized or credited to the men around her. This pattern repeats, echoing down the halls of Scottish history, suggesting not the absence of agency, but rather the deliberate masking of it. Perhaps no figure better encapsulates the drama and mystique of Scottish queenship than Mary, Queen of Scots. Her story has been told countless times, yet it remains compelling because it is layered with ambiguities and unresolved tensions. Ascending to the throne as an infant, Mary spent her early years in France and returned to Scotland as a refined, cosmopolitan figure, utterly unprepared for the tribal politics and religious strife that awaited her. Her reign was marked by personal tragedy, political missteps, and a series of ill-fated marriages. Yet beneath the surface, there exists a more complex narrative. Mary was deeply intelligent and politically astute. Her choices, often painted as impulsive or romantic, can be seen in another light, as acts of a woman attempting to assert power in a male-dominated court and country. The events leading to her abdication and eventual execution in England are shrouded in intrigue. What truths were lost in the propaganda wars waged by her enemies? What loyalties did she command that never made it into official record? Her letters, some of which were intercepted and forged, suggest layers of strategy and hidden alliances. There are hints of an alternative power structure operating behind the scenes, involving secret correspondence, covert support from European allies, and the protection of a lineage that posed a threat to English claims on the Scottish crown. This lineage, the so-called untold lineage, is not confined to Mary alone. Throughout Scottish history, there are references to lost heirs, secret births, and obscure connections that link Scotland's queens to ancient traditions and continental bloodlines. Some legends suggest that the royal blood of Scotland carried traces of the old Celtic priesthood, a sacred line that predated Christianity and was carefully guarded through matrilineal descent. Such claims, while not verifiable by conventional means, reflect the mystique surrounding these women. Their bloodlines were not only dynastic tools but spiritual symbols, connecting the kingdom to divine or mythic legitimacy. The enigma deepens when one explores the lesser-known queens and royal women whose names do not often appear in textbooks. Euphemia Ross, the first wife of Robert Stuart, who became Robert II, bore him several children before dying relatively young. Her offspring were sidelined in the succession in favor of the children of his second marriage, giving rise to competing claims and fueling civil unrest. Euphemia's story, and those of her children, opens the door to a pattern: royal women whose progeny were quietly written out of history when politically inconvenient, yet who may have maintained clandestine influence through marriage alliances and spiritual affiliations. Isabel of Mar, the first wife of Robert the Bruce, is another such figure. Dying shortly after giving birth to a daughter, her legacy is often overshadowed by that of Bruce's second wife, Elizabeth de Burgh. However, the Mar bloodline held immense regional power and was rooted in ancient Pictish traditions. Some historians suggest that Isabel's union with Bruce was more than a political marriage. It may have been a union of symbolic significance, merging warrior king with sacred queen, an echo of the ancient right of sovereignty that required the king to marry the land through its living representative. This mystical dimension of queenship is not mere fantasy. It finds echoes in the way queens were revered, or feared, within folk memory. The notion that queens embodied the fate of the land can be found in tales of famine, fertility, and fortune linked to their presence or absence. When a queen was loved and prosperous, the land thrived. When she was reviled or met with misfortune, droughts and disasters were said to follow. These stories persisted for generations, embedding the idea that the queen's soul was somehow entwined with the destiny of the nation. Moving into the early modern period, queens such as Anne of Denmark, wife of James VI and first of England and Scotland, continued this pattern of complex influence, and was a patron of the arts, a devout yet independent thinker, and a key player in courtly politics. She navigated the treacherous waters of the union between England and Scotland, maintaining her own circle of power even as her husband sought to centralize authority. Anne's Danish heritage brought with it traditions and networks unfamiliar to the Scottish nobility, and her support of theatrical and esoteric art forms has led some scholars to believe she was involved in, or at least sympathetic to, occult and alchemical traditions. Anne's daughter, Elizabeth Stuart, also plays a fascinating role in the story of the untold lineage. Married off to Frederick V of the Palatinate, Elizabeth became known as the Winter Queen for her brief reign in Bohemia, but her descendants would go on to form the House of Hanover, eventually inheriting the British throne. The royal blood of Scotland thus extended far beyond its borders, winding its way through Europe and into the highest echelons of international power. And yet, this dynastic triumph masks another truth: Elizabeth's political exile, her persistent financial struggles, and her philosophical leanings toward mysticism and secret societies. As one delves deeper into the record, certain patterns emerge. Scotland's queens, far from being passive figures, often operated in dual realms: the overt world of court and politics, and the covert realm of spiritual and symbolic authority. Their letters, wills, and patronages suggest an awareness of their roles as more than just consorts. Many were deeply involved in the dissemination of religious reform or preservation of old traditions, acting as bridges between opposing ideologies. Their legacies persist in the artifacts they left behind: manuscripts, jewelry, buildings, and oral traditions that hint at their inner lives and private missions. In this sense, the notion of an untold lineage is not merely a genealogical concept, but a spiritual and cultural one. It speaks to a continuity of purpose and power that transcends names and dates. It suggests that the Queens of Scotland were keepers of a sacred trust, one that required silence as much as speech, concealment as much as proclamation. Their secrets, whether political or mystical, were not accidental. They were essential to the maintenance of their influence and, by extension, the survival of Scotland's unique identity. Even today, the legacy of Scotland's queens is felt in subtle ways. The romanticized image of Mary, Queen of Scots, continues to inspire artists and writers. The symbolic power of the crown remains tied to notions of ancient sovereignty, reinforced by centuries of lore surrounding queenship. Scottish identity, fiercely independent and rich with myth, still honors these women as more than historical figures. They are icons of a national spirit that refuses to be simplified. Ultimately, to explore the lives of Scotland's queens is to uncover a hidden map of the nation's soul. These women were not only mothers of kings and bearers of alliances, they were visionaries, rebels, mystics, and guardians of a lineage that defied simple definition. Their stories, often half-told or buried beneath political debris, still whisper through the corridors of castles and chapels. They urge us to look beyond the official records and into the shadows where truth and legend intertwine. In lifting the veil on their lives, we do not merely revise history, we expand it, giving voice to those whose silence was strategic, whose power was subtle, and whose influence endures. The untold lineage of Scotland's queens is not lost. It lives on, in ruins and relics, in stories passed from mother to daughter, in the persistent magic that clings to the Highlands and Lowlands alike. Their enigmatic legacy invites us to see Scotland not just as a land of battles and borders, but as a realm shaped by women whose mystery was their greatest strength. The royal story of Scotland is not one of isolation, but of deep interweaving with the courts and crowns of continental Europe. The queens who graced the Scottish throne, whether by birth or by marriage, did not exist in a vacuum. They brought with them legacies stretching far beyond the borders of Scotland, and their presence altered the trajectory of the kingdom in ways often overlooked in traditional narratives. Beneath the surface of marriage treaties and dynastic charts lies a web of ancestry and influence, shaped by alliances with France, England, and Scandinavia. The bloodlines of these women carried the weight of empires, and their connections had consequences that rippled through Scottish history, forging paths of peace, war, and cultural transformation. Their royal roots were not merely ceremonial badges of honor. They were active elements in shaping the Scottish identity, both in the medieval age and in the centuries that followed. To fully understand the reach and resonance of these royal women, one must begin not in the Highlands or border castles of Scotland, but in the elaborate courts of France, the turbulent dynasties of England, and the icy strongholds of Scandinavia. It was from these realms that many of Scotland's queens came, bearing dowries and expectations, and carrying within their veins a complex mix of loyalty, ambition, and the subtle power of inherited prestige. Some arrived as peace offerings in treaties. Others were strategic links in a broader game of continental chess. All became pivotal figures in Scottish statecraft, whether their influence was celebrated or quietly endured. Take, for instance, Margaret of England, daughter of Henry III and Eleanor of Provence. She married Alexander III of Scotland during the 13th century, a union that was meant to secure peace between the two nations. Margaret's ancestry was steeped in Plantagenet authority, tying Scotland to the powerful English royal family. Her presence at the Scottish court symbolized a fragile accord between the two kingdoms, yet it also introduced subtle shifts in how power and legitimacy were perceived. Her progeny would carry both Scottish and English blood, creating future dilemmas of succession and allegiance. More importantly, Margaret brought with her a sense of cultural refinement shaped by the Plantagenet court, influencing artistic tastes and courtly behavior in her adopted home. Further reaching into the mists of time, one finds Saint Margaret of Scotland, who was born in Hungary and descended from the ancient royal houses of England and Wessex. Her father, Edward the Exile, was a descendant of the Anglo-Saxon kings, and her mother was a member of the Hungarian royal family. After the Norman conquest of England, Margaret fled to Scotland and eventually married Malcolm III. Her lineage, spanning the Old English monarchy and Eastern European nobility, bestowed upon her a unique stature. As queen, she became a transformative force in Scotland, encouraging religious reform, education, and increased alignment with European norms. Her children would go on to found the House of Dunkeld, a dynasty that anchored Scotland in a wider Christian monarchic network and gave the kingdom a stronger footing in European diplomatic circles. Margaret's daughter, Matilda of Scotland, married Henry I of England, merging two royal lines and further complicating the relationship between Scotland and its southern neighbor. Through Matilda, Scottish blood entered the veins of the English monarchy. The cross-pollination of royal families led to repeated claims and counterclaims of sovereignty, especially during times of succession crises. This intermingling of ancestry helped lay the groundwork for future conflicts, most notably the Wars of Scottish Independence. At the heart of these wars were competing ideas of legitimate rule, many of which hinged on the tangled web of ancestral claims rooted in past royal unions. The connections between Scotland and France became especially prominent in later centuries. The Auld Alliance, formed in the late 13th century, was not only a military pact but also a dynastic strategy. Marriages between Scottish and French royals became a way to strengthen bonds and resist English dominance. Mary of Guelders, who married James II of Scotland in the 15th century, exemplifies this pattern. She came from a powerful Dutch-French background and brought with her significant diplomatic weight. Her marriage was arranged with the support of Charles VII of France, reinforcing the Franco-Scottish alliance. After her husband's death, Mary served as regent for her young son, James III, navigating a turbulent political environment with skill and determination. Mary of Guelders's legacy was not merely administrative. She helped shape the perception of the Scottish monarchy as part of a broader European aristocracy. Her patronage of the arts, architecture, and ecclesiastical reform established cultural bridges between Scotland and the continent. Her background ensured that the Scottish court did not stagnate, but remained in dialogue with the stylistic and ideological currents of Europe. Her presence also introduced new familial ties that linked Scotland not only to France, but to the territories of the Holy Roman Empire, thereby expanding the diplomatic options available to future monarchs. In the 16th century, the bond between France and Scotland was further cemented through the marriage of Mary, Queen of Scots, to Francis II of France. Mary's mother, Marie de Guise, was herself a scion of one of France's most powerful noble houses. Through her, Mary inherited connections to the Valois dynasty and the broader Catholic world. Her French upbringing and subsequent marriage positioned her as a continental princess as much as a Scottish queen. This dual identity would later contribute to both her appeal and her downfall. In returning to Scotland after the death of her French husband, Mary brought with her not only memories of courtly grandeur, but also expectations of power and deference shaped by a very different political culture. Mary's complex ancestry and her brief tenure as Queen Consort of France made her a symbol of Catholic legitimacy in a Protestant Britain. Her lineage became both her greatest asset and her most dangerous liability. English Protestants viewed her as a threat due to her claim to the English throne through her grandmother, Margaret Tudor, sister of Henry VIII. The Tudor link introduced yet another layer of royal roots that bridged Scotland and England. Mary's ancestry thus placed her at the center of a deadly game involving religion, politics, and succession. Her fate, imprisonment, and eventual execution, was a direct result of the potent symbolism carried by her bloodline. The marriage of James IV of Scotland to Margaret Tudor, daughter of Henry VII of England, further complicated the dynastic web. This union was intended to solidify peace between the two nations and ultimately led to the union of the crowns a century later. Through Margaret, the Scottish royal house gained a direct claim to the English throne. Their great-grandson, James VI of Scotland, would eventually inherit the English crown as James I of England, uniting the two crowns and reshaping British political geography. This seismic shift was rooted in a single marriage that had been orchestrated generations earlier, reflecting how royal roots could alter the fate of kingdoms long after the initial alliance. Margaret Tudor's role extended beyond her diplomatic marriage. Following the death of her husband at the Battle of Flodden, she served as regent for their son, James V. Her English heritage, however, made her a contentious figure in a kingdom wary of Southern influence. She remarried twice, each time entangling herself further in the fraught politics of Scottish nobility. Yet her legacy endured, not least because her descendants would come to rule both Scotland and England under the banner of a united monarchy. Her Tudor blood ensured that the line of succession remained a matter of cross-border consequence. James V's own marriage to Mary of Guise further extended the lineage's continental reach. The Guise family was one of the most influential noble houses in France, closely aligned with the Catholic Church and frequently at odds with Protestant factions. Mary of Guise's role as queen and later as regent placed her at the center of Scotland's religious upheaval. Her foreign background was both a strength and a vulnerability. It gave her access to support from Catholic Europe, but it also fueled suspicion among Protestant reformers. Her governance, and the upbringing she provided her daughter Mary, Queen of Scots, were deeply shaped by her French upbringing and her ambitions for a Catholic restoration. The royal roots of Scottish queens were not limited to Western Europe. Scandinavian connections also played a vital role. Margaret of Denmark, queen consort to James III, brought with her the territories of Orkney and Shetland as part of her dowry. These islands had long been under Norse control, and their transfer to Scotland marked a significant territorial gain. Margaret's marriage was not just a transaction, but a geopolitical maneuver that extended Scotland's reach into the North Sea and solidified its maritime presence. Her descendants inherited a kingdom richer in resources and more complex in its cultural makeup. Margaret of Denmark's ancestry linked the Scottish royal family to the old Viking nobility of Scandinavia, a legacy that resonated in subtle ways. The integration of Norse territories brought new trade routes, fresh military challenges, and a blending of traditions. In the Scottish court, where Gaelic, Norman, and Norse influences collided, queens like Margaret acted as cultural mediators. Their presence helped balance competing identities, smoothing over the fractures that came with expansion and alliance. The impact of these royal alliances on Scottish politics cannot be overstated. They influenced everything from courtly fashion to religious policy, from succession disputes to military campaigns. These queens were not merely vessels for foreign blood. They were active agents in a process of cultural synthesis and political negotiation. Their royal roots provided leverage in international diplomacy, and their personal networks often extended beyond their official duties. Letters, patronage, and religious affiliations all played roles in shaping the policies of their time. Through centuries of intermarriage, the Scottish monarchy became a nexus of European power. Its queens carried the legacies of Charlemagne, the Plantagenets, the Capetians, and the Nordic kings. Each alliance added layers to the national narrative, weaving Scotland into the broader fabric of European history. Yet these connections also brought conflict, as claims overlapped, loyalties shifted, and identities were contested. The question of who was truly Scottish, truly sovereign, and truly royal often hinged on these very ties. In examining the ancestral threads of Scottish queens, one finds not only a map of European aristocracy, but also a story of transformation. These women brought with them not just foreign customs and noble blood, but new ideas, challenges, and visions for what Scotland could become. They stood at the crossroads of nations, their marriages forming the silent architecture of empires. Their royal roots were never just personal. They were political weapons, cultural bridges, and the invisible hands that shaped a nation's fate. Through them, the story of Scotland became a story of the world. The story of Scotland's monarchy is often told in sweeping narratives of battles, coronations, treaties, and reforms, where kings and queens are reduced to dates and titles, as if the bloodline of a nation were a straight line from crown to crown. Yet beneath this polished surface lies a deeper, messier reality, one in which secrets were currency, and the future of the kingdom was shaped as much by what was hidden as by what was declared. The Scottish royal family, like many others in medieval and early modern Europe, was no stranger to concealed unions, illegitimate heirs, and whispered conspiracies. These hidden threads, buried in forgotten letters and obscured chronicles, form an essential part of the true history of Scotland's monarchy. They offer a story not just of kings and queens, but of forbidden love, betrayal, ambition, and the quiet power of those whose names were never meant to be remembered. Royal families throughout Europe were obsessed with bloodlines, purity, legitimacy, continuity. In Scotland, where dynastic survival often hung by a thread, lineage was everything. But the official record rarely tells the full story. Marriages that were never sanctified, children born out of wedlock, alliances forged in secrecy. These were not anomalies, but rather part of a wider, often unacknowledged reality. The survival of the dynasty sometimes depended on such arrangements, even if they were never written into law or celebrated in ceremony. These hidden threads frequently surfaced at times of crisis, their revelation capable of reshaping succession, altering allegiances, or even starting wars. Take the case of Robert II, the first monarch of the House of Stuart. Before marrying Elizabeth Muir, Robert had fathered several children with her while she was still considered his mistress. Although they eventually wed, questions lingered over the legitimacy of their offspring, leading to disputes over succession that would ripple through the following generations. The children born before the marriage were legitimized through papal dispensation, but suspicion and resentment remained. Rival factions in the court clung to these doubts, and the effects were long-lasting. Robert's family tree became a battleground, with sons from his two marriages staking competing claims to the throne, and their descendants becoming embroiled in deadly rivalries that would plague the Stuart dynasty for centuries. This situation was not an isolated one. The Stuarts, like many royal houses, often balanced political necessity against moral scrutiny. James IV fathered multiple illegitimate children with several noblewomen before and during his marriage to Margaret Tudor. One of these sons, Alexander Stuart, was appointed Archbishop of St. Andrews while still a teenager, a position of enormous power in both secular and ecclesiastical terms. Though Alexander died young at the Battle of Flodden, his existence had already demonstrated how royal bastards could be placed strategically, used to secure influence in church and court alike. His siblings, many of them similarly born outside of wedlock, were granted titles, lands, and roles that placed them firmly within the power structure of the realm. The ambiguity surrounding the legitimacy of heirs often served as a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provided monarchs with flexible options for rewarding loyalty and placing trusted blood relations in key positions. On the other, it left the door open for future challenges to the throne. In the years following James IV's death, these questions resurfaced in more dangerous ways. His grandson, James V, followed his father's example by fathering several children outside of marriage. Among these was James Stuart, later made Earl of Moray. He would go on to become Regent of Scotland during the minority of his half-nephew, the son of Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary herself stands at the center of many whispered stories of hidden lineages and secret decisions. Her reign was marked by romantic scandals and political upheaval, and questions about her judgment and motives continue to fascinate. Yet even more compelling are the rumors that surround her own lineage and that of her descendants. Some theories suggest that Mary may have borne additional children besides her well-known son, James VI of Scotland and I of England. While no conclusive evidence has surfaced, letters and foreign reports hint at the possibility of pregnancies during periods of her captivity in England. If true, such children would have presented enormous political complications, both for Elizabeth I and for Mary's many supporters in Europe. The absence of concrete proof does not eliminate the possibility. In royal courts, where access was tightly controlled and information manipulated, it would not have been difficult to conceal a birth, especially one that threatened the balance of power. These theories are not unique to Mary. The possibility of hidden children appears again and again in Scottish royal history. The House of Stuart, in particular, is riddled with rumors of concealed unions and the offspring they produced. James V reportedly had several illegitimate daughters in addition to the better-known sons, and some of these women were quietly married off to loyal nobles, their children eventually absorbed into the aristocracy. These descendants, while technically not in the line of succession, often maintained enough proximity to power to influence decisions behind the scenes. Their identities were sometimes deliberately obscured, names changed, titles hidden, in an effort to prevent the consolidation of rival claims. Yet over generations, these bloodlines continued to exist, and their very presence in the noble class shaped the political landscape of the realm. One particularly compelling example is the alleged hidden daughter of James V, who may have married into a powerful Scottish family, her lineage quietly merging into the fabric of the nobility. Oral traditions and certain regional histories maintain that this line persisted for generations, influencing events from the shadows. Some modern genealogists have tried to trace this lineage, connecting certain clans to the royal bloodline through unofficial channels. While proof remains elusive, the persistence of the claim is telling. In a society where ancestry was currency, even the rumor of royal blood could carry enormous weight. Scotland's long-standing tension with England also played a role in concealing certain lineages. During times of union and division, royal claims became tools of both diplomacy and rebellion. Those with even a distant claim to the throne were potential threats or potential allies, depending on the political winds. As a result, some lineages were deliberately suppressed, their members relocated or silenced to avoid stirring unrest. Others were elevated, their connections emphasized or even exaggerated to support certain policies or treaties. In this fluid context, the hidden threads of the monarchy were not merely family secrets, they were instruments of statecraft. The queens of Scotland were often at the heart of these tangled stories. Consider Margaret Tudor, who after the death of her first husband James IV, remarried Archibald Douglas, Earl of Angus. Their daughter, Margaret Douglas, went on to become the mother of Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, who married Mary, Queen of Scots. This made Margaret Douglas both Mary's cousin and mother-in-law, and her royal Tudor blood gave her descendants a strong claim to the English throne. But in the years between her parents' marriage and her rise to prominence, Margaret Douglas's position was perilous. The legitimacy of her mother's second marriage was questioned, and Margaret herself was at various times imprisoned in England for her romantic involvements. These complications demonstrate how easily royal legitimacy could be called into question, and how frequently queens and their children found themselves at the center of these controversies. The shadows grow deeper when we consider less well-documented queens and consorts, many of whom played crucial roles in shaping the royal lineage, yet have left behind few records. Some may have borne children who were quietly removed from court for political reasons. Others may have had relationships, legitimate or otherwise, that were never publicly acknowledged. The lack of documentation is itself revealing. In a time when records were selectively kept and frequently destroyed, absence often speaks as loudly as presence. Every missing letter, every vanished baptismal record, every erased name is a potential clue to a hidden thread. These obscured narratives also extend beyond the royal family to the broader noble class. Illegitimate children of monarchs and queens often married into other powerful families, creating networks of influence that defy traditional genealogical maps. Their descendants might not carry royal titles, but they carried royal blood, and in a society that prized blood above all, that often mattered more than official rank. Some of the most influential figures in Scottish history, advisors, military leaders, even regents, may have owed their positions not only to merit or loyalty, but to unspoken connections with the crown. The allure of these hidden lineages has endured for centuries. Even today, historians, genealogists, and enthusiasts continue to search for clues. Tombs are examined, DNA analyzed, old letters retranslated. Some theories verge on the conspiratorial. Others are grounded in compelling, if incomplete, evidence. Was there a secret child born to Mary, Queen of Scots, during her captivity? Did a hidden heir to the Stuart line survive the upheavals of the 17th century and escape into exile? Were certain noble families elevated due to unspoken royal ties? These questions remain unanswered, not for lack of curiosity, but because the very nature of these secrets makes them resistant to discovery. The mythology surrounding the hidden threads of the Scottish monarchy adds to the mystique of the nation itself. In a land known for misty glens and ancient stones, where legend and history often blend, these royal secrets feel less like fabrications and more like truths waiting to be uncovered. They reflect a time when power was personal, when alliances were forged in bedchambers and broken in whispered rumors, when the future of a kingdom might hang on a name never written in the official ledger. Ultimately, the story of Scotland's monarchy cannot be told in full without acknowledging these hidden elements. The secret marriages, the illegitimate children, the buried connections, they are not footnotes but central threads in the royal tapestry. They speak to the complexity of dynastic power, to the fragile line between legitimacy and ambition, and to the quiet strength of those whose lives were shaped by royal blood yet lived in the shadows. These stories challenge the neat divisions of royal history, reminding us that the truth of power is often found not in what is said, but in what is hidden. And so the search continues, through archives and legends, through whispers and genealogies, in pursuit of a lineage that was never truly lost, only concealed. The story of Scotland's royal history does not end in dusty castles or faded parchments. It lives on, not just in books and museums, but in the lives of people today who carry fragments of that past in their names, in their DNA, and in their sense of cultural identity. The Queens of Scotland, whose power, influence, and secrets shaped centuries of rule, left behind more than an official legacy. They left a trail of unspoken truths, forgotten branches, and veiled connections that modern eyes are only now beginning to recognize. This ongoing unraveling of the untold lineage is not simply an academic endeavor. It is a rediscovery of who we are, where we come from, and what narratives have shaped our present in ways both visible and invisible. The untold lineage, those forgotten or hidden children, obscure marriages, and shadowy alliances, has remained hidden for so long not just because it was suppressed, but because history has often been told through a narrow lens. Until recent decades, royal history was written primarily by those in power, with an interest in preserving order, legitimacy, and clarity. But real history is seldom clear, and power is rarely so tidy. With the rise of modern genealogical tools, from digital archives to DNA testing, we now have the ability to follow bloodlines beyond the borders of official documents and into the shadows where history once refused to look. These tools are giving voice to ancestors who were silenced, and to lineages once thought extinguished. Across the world, people are discovering that they are distant cousins of kings, queens, or noble houses that ruled centuries ago. This phenomenon is not as rare as one might assume. The royal families of medieval and early modern Europe were prolific and intertwined, and their illegitimate children often married into local gentry, spreading royal blood throughout the wider population. In Scotland, where the monarchy was often embroiled in internal strife, dynastic collapse, and succession disputes, the number of hidden heirs and alternative lines of descent is significant. These descendants, once irrelevant to the politics of the day, are now being rediscovered as part of a deeper understanding of heritage. The allure of discovering royal ancestry is not merely romantic. For many, it serves as a way to connect to a larger historical narrative, to make sense of their place in the grand sweep of time. A person in a quiet Highland village or a bustling city across the Atlantic might suddenly discover that their family name traces back to a royal mistress, a forgotten daughter, or a concealed heir. What follows is often a journey of personal exploration, a digging into records, oral histories, and church registers. And what begins as a curiosity can quickly turn into a passionate quest, one that connects individuals to the land, the culture, and the struggles of their ancestors. These revelations also challenge the traditional understanding of legacy. A legacy is usually thought of as something left by the powerful to the next generation of the powerful. But the untold lineage inverts that idea. Here, legacy becomes something that was hidden, intentionally or otherwise, and is now emerging not among monarchs and politicians, but among everyday people. It is a democratization of history, reminding us that the past does not only belong to the few, but to the many. The Queens of Scotland, whose influence shaped the nation in ways both public and private, are central to this story. Their children, both legitimate and otherwise, spread through the population, forming new lines, influencing regional identities, and ensuring that their legacy lived on even where the crown did not. One of the most fascinating aspects of this legacy is how it is being revealed through science. Genetic testing has opened new pathways into history, confirming connections that were once only speculation. A person's DNA might match that of known descendants of royal bloodlines, suggesting a link that had been obscured by time or secrecy. In some cases, entire family histories are being rewritten based on such discoveries. A family that believed itself to be rooted in local farming for generations might suddenly learn that their ancestors were descended from a noble line, exiled or erased for political reasons. These moments are not just academic, they are deeply emotional, tying identity to the flow of history in a direct and personal way. At the same time, archival discoveries are also changing what we know. Letters thought to be lost are being found in private collections. Church documents hidden in dusty boxes are being digitized. Forgotten wills, contracts, and baptismal records are resurfacing, allowing historians and amateur genealogists to reconstruct family trees with surprising accuracy. In Scotland, local historians and community heritage groups are playing a crucial role in this work, preserving oral traditions, mapping old cemeteries and cross-referencing local lore with official records. It is a kind of detective work that combines the tools of the past and the present, scrolls and software, legends and lab results. Through this research, long-held mysteries are beginning to yield answers. There are ongoing investigations into whether certain children of queens who supposedly died in infancy may in fact have been spirited away for political or religious reasons. In some cases, compelling evidence suggests that such children survived under assumed identities, married, and produced lines that continue to this day. These stories sound like novels, but they are rooted in serious inquiry. Each new piece of evidence, be it a name, a location, a family crest, or a DNA match, brings us closer to understanding the full scope of Scotland's royal legacy. And yet, some questions remain tantalizingly unanswered. Did Mary, Queen of Scots, truly have only one child? Or was there another child, hidden away during her captivity, whose descendants might still walk among us? What became of the daughters born to kings and queens who never entered convents or political marriages? Were their lineages truly lost, or simply buried under layers of social expectation and political expediency? The lack of clear answers keeps the door open to imagination and discovery, inspiring writers, filmmakers, and researchers alike. The very mystery becomes part of the legacy, a living puzzle that refuses to be closed. These explorations are not without controversy. Some discoveries challenge long-accepted historical narratives or pose uncomfortable questions about legitimacy and inheritance. If a new line of descent were discovered with a stronger claim to the Scottish throne than the one that led to the Union of Crowns, what would that mean? In a modern context, such claims are symbolic rather than political, but their cultural weight is still significant. They force a reconsideration of how history is told, who gets to tell it, and what voices were excluded from the official record. This growing interest in royal lineage also has a cultural impact. In Scotland and among the diaspora, there is renewed pride in heritage, a deeper connection to place, and a stronger appreciation for the complexities of the past. Historical tourism is on the rise, with visitors seeking not just monuments but stories, real, personal stories that tie them to the land and its people. Local communities are embracing this interest, creating opportunities for education, celebration, and shared exploration. The Queens of Scotland are no longer distant figures on faded portraits. They are becoming touchstones of identity, their lives re-examined through fresh eyes and modern tools. Educational programs are beginning to incorporate these discoveries, teaching young people that history is not static, but alive, changing as we learn more. The study of genealogy is increasingly seen not just as a personal hobby, but as a valid form of historical research, one that complements and enriches traditional scholarship. Libraries, universities, and archives are collaborating to build digital tools that make this research more accessible than ever before. The effect is transformative, not only for the study of history, but for how people see themselves in relation to it. The unraveling of this legacy also has a unique emotional resonance. Many people who embark on genealogical research expecting simple family stories find instead tales of hardship, sacrifice, resilience, and survival. They find queens whose marriages were political prisons, children who were hidden for their own protection, and families torn apart by war and ambition. These stories humanize the monarchy, stripping away the myths of grandeur to reveal the deeply personal struggles that define these lives. In doing so, they create empathy across centuries, bridging the distance between past and present. In the context of Scotland's ongoing conversation about identity, independence, and nationhood, these discoveries take on even greater meaning. They remind us that the story of Scotland is not just one of power and politics, but of people, of choices made in secret, and of legacies passed down not just in titles, but in blood and memory. The Queens of Scotland, with all their strength, mystery, and complexity, symbolize this enduring truth. Their untold lineage, once obscured, is now becoming a guiding thread in the nation's evolving narrative. The unraveling of the legacy is far from over. New discoveries are made every year. New questions arise with each answer. This is not a closed book, but a living document, constantly being written and rewritten. And while not every mystery will be solved, the pursuit itself has value. It teaches us to look closer, to ask better questions, and to listen to the voices that history once tried to silence. For those who feel the pull of the past, who suspect that there might be more to their story than they have been told, now is the time to explore. The tools exist. The records are opening. The whispers of queens and their hidden children are growing louder, urging us to find them, to name them, to remember. In doing so, we not only honor the past, we make it whole. This is the true power of legacy, not what is preserved in stone, but what survives in the hearts and blood of those who come after. The queens of Scotland, with all their grace, their fire, their tragedy and triumph, continue to shape the present through the threads they left behind. And as we unravel those threads, we do not merely look back. We step forward, carrying their stories into a future that they too helped to create. The history of the Scottish monarchy is far more than a sequence of battles, treaties, and coronations. It is a deep, intricate, and often veiled story woven through with love, ambition, betrayal, survival, and mystery. At its very heart lies a legacy shaped as much by what was hidden as by what was celebrated, shaped not just by kings and warriors, but by women, queens whose roles in the royal narrative were far more significant than history books have long acknowledged. These queens, whether born into Scottish blood or brought from foreign courts, formed the emotional and political spine of the realm, often guiding the nation through its most tumultuous chapters, whether in the light of public glory or from the shadows of secrecy. What emerges from this exploration is a story built on complexity. The lineage of Scotland's royalty was not a simple line of succession, marked cleanly from monarch to monarch. Instead, it was a living, shifting tapestry, colored by the aspirations and fates of those on the margins of power. Hidden marriages, secret alliances, illegitimate children, and political cover-ups all played a role in shaping the monarchy's path. These were not exceptions to the rule but vital, if unspoken, parts of the rule itself. Some queens were born into dynastic expectation, bred from the finest noble blood in Europe to marry and bear heirs. Others rose from less certain origins, marrying into the throne under precarious or extraordinary circumstances. But each woman carried with her a unique combination of personal will and inherited duty. Their power might not always have been public, but it was persistent. In some cases, they ruled as regents. In others, they influenced court politics through networks of family, friendship, and strategic alliance. In many, they became symbols of resistance or change, embodying both the hopes and fears of their time. The enduring mystery of the Scottish queens lies not only in what they did, but in what remains unknown about them. So many details of their lives were never recorded, or were intentionally hidden. The royal courts were places of constant performance, where a misplaced word or rumor could shift the balance of power, and many of these queens learned to live within a world of masks and coded language. The result is a legacy both fascinating and elusive. Their stories have survived in fragments, in letters, in genealogical traces, in oral traditions whispered across centuries, and each piece offers only a glimpse of the fuller lives they led. What we have uncovered throughout the exploration of these royal women is the undeniable impact of lineage, not only in shaping succession, but in shaping identity itself. Blood was not just a matter of inheritance. It was a symbol of legitimacy, of divine right, of destiny. Yet that very notion of lineage was often far from straightforward. In a world where royal legitimacy was both a legal necessity and a political weapon, truths were frequently hidden or altered. Marriages were unrecorded or disguised. Children were claimed or denied as the situation demanded. The result was a monarchy built not just on public acts but on private maneuverings, some of which continue to remain just out of reach. The fascination with these untold stories endures today because they challenge our understanding of history as a fixed narrative. They invite us to imagine the real people behind the titles and portraits, to wonder what conversations took place behind closed doors, to ask what loyalties and sacrifices shaped a queen's decisions, and to consider how many unknown figures influenced the nation's course through their proximity to power. The queens of Scotland remind us that history is full of silences, and that those silences often speak the loudest when we listen closely. As modern tools have begun to uncover the secrets once buried under centuries of dust and discretion, we are gaining a clearer, though still incomplete, picture of these women. Genealogical research, aided by technology and global collaboration, is bringing new clarity to old mysteries. DNA testing, rediscovered documents, and re-examined records are challenging long-held assumptions. Names once relegated to the margins are now being recognized as central to Scotland's royal story. Individuals once considered insignificant are being restored to their rightful place in the narrative, and the web of royal descent is being expanded and rewritten. What is especially captivating is that the story of the Scottish queens does not end in the past. Their influence continues to be felt. Their blood still runs through the veins of countless people today, some of whom are just beginning to realize their connection to this royal legacy. Others have carried that awareness for generations, passed down like a treasured heirloom from parent to child. The queens live on not only in the grand halls of Edinburgh or Stirling, but in the quiet family trees of ordinary people. People whose ancestors were once whispered about in court corridors or hidden away in country estates. And it is not only in blood that they persist. These queens shaped Scotland's cultural identity, leaving their mark on language, religion, law, and tradition. They helped establish schools and hospitals, influenced church practices, and acted as mediators during times of war. In some cases, their legacies are etched into the landscape. In abbeys they founded, in castles they graced, in stained glass windows that still catch the light centuries later. Their stories, whether well-known or obscure, contribute to a deeper understanding of Scotland itself, not just as a geographical territory, but as an evolving idea carried through generations. What remains so powerful about their legacy is that it continues to provoke questions. Did a hidden daughter of a queen survive the purge of a rival faction and live a quiet life under an assumed name? Was a child spirited away to protect them from political retribution, their descendants living unknowingly far from the throne they might have claimed? Were their marriages forged in secrecy that permanently altered the royal bloodline, hidden because the truth threatened too much? These questions linger because they feel possible. The monarchy, for all its pomp and tradition, was made up of people who loved and feared, who made choices in desperate moments, who struggled to protect themselves and their families in a dangerous world. The queens of Scotland were no different. Their lives, often spent navigating a world that demanded obedience while punishing ambition, were marked by extraordinary strength. That strength still resonates, not only in historical accounts, but in the imagination of those who seek to know more. To explore the enduring mystery of Scotland's queens is to step into a world where fact and legend blend, where the known is only part of the picture, and where the most compelling stories are those not fully told. It is to follow a trail of clues left in forgotten places, to listen for echoes in the silence of history. It is to recognize that behind every record there is a life, and behind every life a chain of influence that stretches far beyond what we can see. The invitation now is to carry this journey forward. For those who find themselves intrigued by these queens, their secrets, and their legacy, there is so much more waiting to be discovered. The archives are still there. The trails are not cold. Every year, new discoveries are made, and new connections are drawn. This is a story that is still unfolding. And it belongs not only to historians, but to everyone who has ever wondered what truths lie hidden in their own past. Share what you find. Talk to your family. Explore old letters, family trees, local legends. Engage with others who are asking the same questions. Contribute to the conversation. You do not need to be a scholar to become part of this journey. You only need curiosity and the willingness to see history not as something distant and unchangeable, but as something alive and responsive. The queens of Scotland deserve to be known not just as wives and mothers, but as the formidable individuals they were, strategists, survivors, visionaries, and protectors of a legacy they often had to guard in silence. Their stories deserve to be discussed, questioned, celebrated, and continued. And through that ongoing conversation, their legacy will not remain untold. It will become part of the ever-growing, ever-changing story of Scotland. So let the questions remain. Let the intrigue deepen. Let the mystery remain, not as a barrier, but as an open door to discovery. And above all, let the queens of Scotland be remembered not just for the crowns they wore, but for the shadows they stepped through, the stories they carried, and the enduring mystery they left for us to explore.